might be thinking, why do I sound like Marcus DePaglia? And what is up with the edgy title of this video? Well, for one, some of my subscribers found it semi-difficult to understand me through the auto-tuned voice in my last video. And two, I'll be putting my infamous 2 cents on an issue regarding a nationally publicized murder case, and a tiny island that most people don't care about nor could find in a map. This is in regards to the murder of Keishla Rodriguez, and the supposed femicide pandemic in Puerto Rico that has been spouted by radical feminists. For a while, the feministas of Puerto Rico have been calling for government action against presumed rise in hate crime committed against women. In fact, at the beginning of this year, Governor Pedro Pierluisi, who ran as a woke candidate in an attempt to brush aside the tarnished legacy of Ricardo Rosselló and the New Progressive Party, declared a state of emergency last January to resolve gender-based violence, quote-unquote. Though Pedro might have thought that caving to the SJW mob would resolve the political polarization on the island. Yet 4 months later, the feminist storm would once again strike the capital after the revelation of another alleged femicide had taken place in San Juan. On May 2nd, 2021, the dead body of Keishla Rodriguez, the mistress of professional boxer Felix Verdejo, was found floating in a lagoon. Keishla was kidnapped by Felix, for which she was severely beaten and drugged before being dumped into the lagoon. Her death was publicized by feminists to further push their agenda into the Puerto Rican government. To clarify, I am not denying that hate crimes against women don't happen, especially in Puerto Rico, nor am I legitimizing or downplaying the murder of women that I'll be addressing. The purpose of this video is to expose the hyperbolic publicity of these crimes, with some being miscategorized as femicides for the sake of spreading a fictitious agenda. In addition, I'll be examining femicide as it's defined, and also delve into a social issue that overlaps with these crimes that feminists overlook. Before delving into the murder of Keishla Rodriguez, I want to first analyze the claim of a supposed 62% increase in femicides last year, since it has been the reason for the state of emergency declared by Governor Pedro Pierluisi. This is based on several reports, most notably the 2020 Femicide and Gender Violence Report by the Gender Equality Observatory of Puerto Rico. Notable news articles in relation to the rise of femicide had constantly been misinterpreting the information cited in the report. Here's an article from DW News. Pay attention to the highlighted context. Last year, the US territory reported 60 femicides and 6 murders of transgender people. Notice that I emphasize the "and" in this text. Here's another article from the Spanish news site El Vocero that pretty much repeats what DW News had said. The Equality Observatory details that the year closes with 60 direct and indirect femicides, 6 trans femicides, and 26 cases that are still under investigation or without information. To summarize my point, both articles claim that the observatory reported 66 women killed last year, 60 of which were victims of femicide and 6 were victims of transphobic hate crime. The report from El Vocero adds an additional 26 deaths from cases still under investigation. 92 deaths sounds like a lot coming from an island with a population slightly lower than Los Angeles that is still struggling from a pandemic. However, in reality, the Gender Equality Observatory actually reported 60 deaths, with 22 femicides, 6 trans femicides, 5 direct femicides, and 27 deaths still under investigation, all lumped together as femicides. Okay, there might have been some journalists who misinterpret the numbers, but 60 deaths in 1 year is still a lot. That's around 1 dead woman a week, right? Unfortunately for feminists, there are some issues with the conclusions of the gender violence report. Mainly that plenty of the listed homicides don't fit the category for femicides as is traditionally defined, how the observatory defines femicide, and the inclusion of murder cases in which the gender of the perpetrator, motive, and even the cause of death of the victims is still unknown. When examining the report, it is important to know how to define femicide and how to determine if the crime fits the category as such. If one were to Google search femicide, they would find that it is defined as the killing of a woman or girl, in particular by a man and on the account of her gender. This definition is straightforward, as it clearly describes femicide as a hate crime done under the idea that women are inferior, along with the complete hatred of the female sex. It fits quite well from what is expected in acts done by incels such as Elliot Roger and Alec Manassian, and serial killers like the Son of Sam and the Yorkshire Ripper. In an in-depth interpretation of femicide, women rights activist Dr. Diana Russell expands on the definition to address systematic and cultural misogyny. This includes honor killings in which a woman is executed by her own family for adulterous behavior, underground abortions that led to accidental deaths, and deaths resulted from sexually transmitted diseases as a result of rape. This definition for the most part is reasonable. Even the Gender Equality Observatory cites it among the other definitions represented in their report, though, as I will point out, plenty of the homicides listed don't exactly fit this definition. I will clarify that I am not denouncing the entire report since they do list actual instances of femicide and transphobic hate crimes. However, that doesn't excuse the observatory in including accidental deaths such as those who have been shot accidentally in the line of fire, with one being listed as direct femicide. In addition, it cites female deaths from shootings in which there were also male victims, and even homicides in which the motive had nothing to do with femicide. For instance, it mentions the death of Dorothy Wickline, who along with her husband and 2 children were killed by Juan Carlos Aponte Ramos, a relative of Dorothy's husband, in an act of revenge for snitching to the police about their criminal son. There's also the killing of Felicita Rosado Santiago and Adia Gonzalez Rosado, for which they were shot along with Felicita's husband by their uncle over a residency dispute. Finally, 26 of these murders haven't even been fully investigated yet, with even one of their observatory's analysis admitting that 50% of the cited femicides haven't been clarified, and that general police figures generally don't include cases still under investigation. Now here's the part where I expose the observatory for political bias and engaging in conspiracy theories. The reasoning for including homicides that hasn't been fully investigated relates to how femicide is also defined as to be the crime of the state. When categorizing femicide, the report tries to use 2 different definitions. The first being the hate crime definition that I had previously went over, and the revisited definition proposed by Mexican feminist Marcela Lagarde. Marcela redefines femicide as the murder of a woman in which investigators and law enforcement deliberately or indiscreetly doing little or nothing to bring justice and eradicate such crimes from happening. In other words, femicide is when sexist cops don't care about dead women. I don't deny that the Puerto Rican government or the Puerto Rican police are corrupt. To be honest, Puerto Rico is a banana republic, but to imply that there's a misogynist conspiracy to ignore female homicides is a big stretch. Also, Dr. Diana Russell has criticized Marcela's definition for globally isolating the term by designating it to developed countries with corrupt governments and excluding modern Western nations in which the perpetrators are usually convicted and punished. Even if I were to accept this definition, most of the listed unsolved murders, which I should say in quotation marks, contradict this narrative. Out of the 27 unsolved femicide cases, 5 had male victims, 6 were found with no signs of a violent attack, 2 of which the victims were more than 50 years old and could have died from natural causes. Once again, I will clarify that in no way am I downplaying these deaths, because regardless of the intent of these killings, this doesn't take away that innocent lives were lost due to deliberate acts of murder. However, that doesn't change the fact that crimes should be correctly categorized to ensure that justice is properly and justly served. This is visible when, to this day, people mistakenly refer to the Las Vegas shooting as a terrorist attack despite there not being any evidence of a political motive. But still, regardless if it was a terrorist attack or a non-causative mass shooting, that doesn't change the fact that 59 lives were lost. We should take the same approach when analyzing the alleged femicide regardless if it fits the criteria for femicide, because at the end of the day, murder is murder no matter the intent or motive. This is definitely true in the murder case of Keishla Rodriguez. Keishla has been propped up by feminists as the latest victim of the femicide pandemic. Everyone, including me, can agree that the circumstances of her death was brutal and heartless. No woman deserves to be treated like a punching bag before being thrown off a bridge like garbage. Nevertheless, this leaves the important question. Is it correct for women activists to label Keishla's death as an instance of femicide, especially when it's done for political publicity? For that, we need to look at the circumstances leading up to the murder of Keishla Rodriguez. Like I said at the beginning of this video, the suspect of her murder is Felix Verdejo, a man who had a long-time adulterous relationship with Keishla. Felix had already been known by most Puerto Ricans for his professional boxing career and for representing PR in the 2012 London Olympics. He is also married to an Instagram influencer and has a 2-year-old daughter with her. Keishla was around 2 months pregnant, and according to her mom, on the night of her disappearance, Keishla was supposed to meet up with Felix to discuss the positive pregnancy test result for which she believed Felix Felix to be the father. Felix was obviously not happy over the pregnancy and had made multiple death threats against her if she didn't get an abortion. Being Keishla's first pregnancy, and being the mother of a celebrity's child, she logically refused to get an abortion and instead cherished the idea of having her own family. Of course, that night in which she was going to confront Felix would be the last time she would ever be alive, as 3 days later her lifeless body was found in the San Jose Lagoon near the Tadero Moscoso Bridge. Some might be thinking that this sounds a lot like an honor killing, which is somewhat true. However, I would not categorize it as such, since honor killings are much more complex. Honor killings isn't just killing a woman for their sexuality, it's a religious practice with misogynist undertones implemented by followers of a sexist religion. It is partaken entirely by Muslims, mostly in the Middle East and South Asia, and is usually done under the guidance of Islamic law and the scriptures of the Quran. Islam, by the way, perceives women as inferior to men, and even in the context of Islamic law, men are excused for having extramarital affairs while women are punished with death. In addition, honor killings serve as a punishment against women for disregarding their chastity. In the case of Keishla Rodriguez, on the other hand, Felix did not carry out to punish his mistress. Rather, the murder was evidently done as a cover-up in a last-ditch attempt to save his marriage and boxing career. Of course, I am in no way defending Felix Verdejo's actions. He should have just taken the responsibilities for his mistakes and accept the consequences. But that's besides the point. The point is that the pretext of the murder wasn't about Keishla being a woman or being a slut, and Felix should not be compared to Elliot Rodger or Peter Sutcliffe, because doing so would water down the despicable and ideological nature of femicide. Finally, I want to end this by addressing the inherent hypocrisy among feminists and SJWs. These people only care to speak for female victims killed by their male partners, yet they choose to be silent when a man is deliberately murdered by his own wife or girlfriend. Mauricide is the deliberate killing of a male partner by a woman, though not as common as the female counterpart, uxoricide. According to data collected by the FBI, for every 100 husbands killed by their wives in the United States, about 75 women kill their husbands. Now, I could bring up the case of Cody Johnson, a man who was pushed off a cliff by his own wife 8 days after their wedding, or I could mention Carol Baskin. But since the video is centered around Puerto Rico, what's more fitting than the murder of Adam Anhang? Anhang was a Canadian real estate millionaire residing in Puerto Rico. He had been married to a former beauty contestant for Miss Puerto Rico, Aria Vasquez Rijos. In September of 2005, after leaving a restaurant, a mysterious man approached the couple and attacked them, while Aria survived with only minor bruises and cuts. Adam was viciously bludgeoned with a brick and stabbed multiple times to the point that he died from a crushed skull and massive blood loss. As his corpse lays bleeding on a bricked road in Old San Juan, the police initially suspected the homicide to be an attack from an attempted robbery. Soon later, they will suspect, charge, and eventually convict Adam's former employee, Jonathan Roman Rivera, for his murder. It didn't take long for the investigation to realize that Jonathan wasn't the man they were looking for. As soon after Jonathan was sentenced to 140 years in prison, Alex Pabon Colon would confess to killing Adam Anhang. Alex admitted that Anhang's wife, Aria Vasquez Rijos, offered him $3 million to murder Adam and frame it as a robbery by punching Aria to make it appear that she was also attacked. At the time, Adam's marriage with Aria wasn't going so well, to the point that he tried convincing her to agree on a divorce settlement. Not wanting to lose her millionaire status, Aria Vasquez hired Colon as a hitman to kill Adam so that she can receive millions of dollars in inheritance. By the time Aria was considered as a suspect, she had already fled to Europe in hiding. It took 13 years to finally locate and extradite Aria Vasquez from Spain to Puerto Rico, where she was then convicted of conspiracy to use interstate commerce facilities in the commission of murder for hire and sentenced to life in prison in 2019. Do you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me how Marcela Lagarde and the Gender Equality Observatory tried to redefine femicide as being the inaction by the police to prosecute female homicides. I'll remind you that it took 1 day for the FBI to charge Felix Verdejo for the murder of Keishla Rodriguez, which, if found guilty, he could face the death penalty. Yet, when a rich gringo Canadian Jew is killed by his Puerto Rican wife, not only did the authorities took more than a decade to arrest and convict her, but in addition incriminate and imprison an innocent man for 8 months for a crime he did not commit. This contradiction is overlooked by feminists as they continue to virtual signal about their justice system being patriarchal. Like everyone, I want justice to be served, but when these cases are being exploited to reinforce a fictitious agenda, it dehumanizes the victims into political tokens. Anyway, I want to know your guys' thoughts on this situation. Please leave a comment below. Also, don't forget to like and share this video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. And for Governor Pedro Pierluisi, this is what I have to say about your stupid tweets.
Beta!